High ticket coaches, if you're struggling with getting reliable payment processing or getting declined on several applications or Stripe is holding your funds, today I'm going to give you a technique to ensure that you don't have any of these problems any longer and that you can get approved for a merchant account and make sure that you have no issues with Stripe. So listen up, and I'm going to go over a couple of things that you need to do today to ensure that you're able to continue processing payments and accepting credit cards. My name is Maria Spragas. I help thousands of 7- and 8-figure merchants figure out their payment processing and ensure that merchant accounts are no longer a headache for their business. And today I really want to talk to you high ticket coaches, as well as others who are selling high ticket programs. When I say high ticket, I want to say $1,000 or more. Now, traditionally, it's seen as $3,000 or more is considered high ticket. But in the merchant account space, when you're accepting credit cards and taking payments with credit cards, anything over $1,000 is where payment processors like Stripe, like my company, Direct Paynet, is where we start asking more questions and really need a lot more details about transactions because there is a lot more money at stake. So if you are selling anything over $1,000 and you are getting declined from getting any merchant processing, or Stripe is giving you a really hard time and holding your money and so forth, one thing you need to keep in mind in order to ensure that your business continues to stay up and running and make sure that you thrive and you're able to continue selling throughout the new year is you need a contract or a service agreement. Now, I see this all the time. We get leads at Direct Paynet from a lot of high ticket coaches. They come to us and they barely have a website with just a couple of little details. And then they tell us, well, I talk to the customers, I send DMs, we have conversations back and forth, or I send them a Google Doc and so forth. And that's how they know about my coaching and so forth. And then they come to us and they say, well, I'm getting declined for merchant accounts. Can you please help me? The issue here is not having a website, not having proper terms and agreements, not having pricing already laid out is going to be a problem for you to get approved, whether it's with my company, Direct Paynet, whether it's, another merchant account company. And if you're working with Stripe and a couple of disputes come in and they ask, hey, what are you selling for that price and so forth, and you don't have a contract explaining what you're selling and the terms, you will likely get shut down. And then, obviously that's going to be very problematic for your business. So I'm going to lay out to you what you need in order to get approved and in order to avoid any problems you may have down the line with your payment processors. And what that is ideally you need to have a complete website explaining what you're selling, perhaps explaining pricing and what is included for that pricing. Now, if you don't want to include all that stuff, there should be some things on the internet available about who you are, what type of programs you offer, and so forth. And then most importantly, what you need is a service agreement, or what we call a contract. So what a contract needs to include and what it is the basis of the relationship between you, your business, and obviously the customer. So you can set the expectations correctly and make sure your customers understand what they're getting involved in, make sure they know how much they're paying, what terms and conditions are expected of them, and so forth. So, it does sound very complicated, but I'll break it down for you, and it's actually quite simple to be compliant. And with this document in hand, you can contact us at Direct Paynet, and when you have a contract, it's much easier for us to get you approved for a merchant account. And my team and I always try to explain this to different businesses that come and approach us, but if you already have it ready, it makes the process so much easier and so much simpler, and obviously it puts you in a better light in terms of business because your processor will say, well, this is a person that's organized and knows what's going on. So now you're wondering, how much money do I have to spend? What do I have to do to get this done, and so forth? So there is obviously one route, which is contacting a lawyer and getting them to draft a service agreement and a contract with everything that's, needed in a legal contract for your business. Now, if you're on a smaller budget or you're really just trying to test this out and you want to see how things work, what you can do is you can use AI. You can use AI to give you a template. And obviously with that template, It's important that you review it, that you make sure it makes sense, that you make any modifications. And then maybe what you can do is, if you want to have somebody take a look at it, you can go have a lawyer just review it, maybe take 1 or 2 hours of their time. But at least even if you just have the AI version with you reviewing it to make sure that it makes sense, it'll give you at least a solid foundation as to, what you can give your customers for them to understand what the commitment is. Now, what you really need in a contract is quite simple. And I mean, I'm sure even in your daily life, you've probably seen different contracts or you signed different contracts, but I'm going to list out a couple of things that are fairly non-negotiable in order to make sure that your contract is valid and makes sense for what you're offering. Now, what you'll definitely need on your contract is, number one, you will need a timeline. So when is the service starting? When does it end? How long does it last? And if it renews, when is the renewal period? So you really gotta kind of lay that out pretty much in the first page of your contract. So again, customers and the banks that are helping you process these payments understand, is this a monthly agreement? Is this a yearly agreement, or whatever the case is, and really kind of lay it out very clearly. Usually within the first 2 paragraphs is where you want to have that type of information. Now, shortly thereafter, what you need is what is included in this service agreement. What are you offering for the customer, and what is he signing up for? So are you offering weekly coaching? Are you offering monthly coaching? Is it a group coaching setting? Are they getting access to any digital content? How can they ask you questions? What is the expected timeline for you to respond to them? So you want to be as clear as possible. Obviously, sometimes these things, there can be some nuances there, but if you have a weekly call in the last 60 minutes, if you know the date and time of that call, that's even better. You want to put that in there. If they have access to a group or some kind of mastermind group or different places that they can share ideas, that's great. If you're answering questions for them for various things, you want to tell them that, they'll get a response back in 24 or 48 hours or whatever you anticipate. And you want to really just lay it all out there very clearly so they know what they're expecting and what they're getting for that. And then further than that, going to the next point is pricing. How much are you charging for this service? Is it a monthly cost? Is it a yearly cost? Is it a one-time fee? Or is it some kind of installment plan? So you need to be clear on that. You may have a couple of different options. For example, you may have option A, 3 payments of $500, or you may have a one-time payment of $1,200, whatever the case is. If you have a couple of options, you put them in there. It would probably be a very good idea for you to highlight the one that the customer chose already in the contract, so it's very clear that what the pricing is that they're gonna have to pay. I will tell you this, if you do have a yearly contract, it is important when the year ends to contact the customer and have them give you their authorization that they're renewing, and if possible, have them sign the agreement again so it's clearly laid out there. 1-year contracts tend to scare some payment processors because it is a long time and sometimes customers forget and there's higher disputes that are possible. But obviously, if you work with 1-year terms and you have it renewable 1 year, you definitely want to put that in there, and you want to put what the pricing is and any increases that may occur. You want to put that in there. Now, further to pricing, what you want to do is you want to have a refund policy. If you have no refunds available, then obviously you put that there is no refund possible. Now, it is always good to have some form of refund policy for even a small delay. For example, if you have your customers sign the contract today, you can say, the program starts in 3 days or a week or whatever the case is, and you can give them a timeline of being able to cancel before the program starts. And you can mention to them that when the program starts, there are no refunds possible because you'll be sharing proprietary information and you are not able to provide a refund. Now, one little caveat there, just because you tell a customer that they cannot refund, it does not mean that they cannot charge back that transaction. So regardless of what is indicated in the contract, if a customer decides that they are going to dispute that transaction with their bank, it is their right, because Visa and MasterCard allow all of their customers to charge back any transaction that they think was charged unfairly, or they didn't receive the product or service, or whatever the case is. But you will protect yourself by having a refund policy in there and explaining what it is. Because, for example, if somebody does charge back and they have signed your agreement, you can actually provide the contract with the terms in there, and you may win that transaction back. Now, if the customer, for example, is claiming that they didn't receive the product or service that you promised and so forth, and their bank sides with them, and it is, for example, a fairly large amount, you can use it to go to small claims court or some kind of legal proceeding if needed, but it gives you options, and having that contract will at least give you a leg to stand on if somebody disputes a transaction. So it is very important to put it in there, and try to be as lax as possible with your refund policy. Don't make it too tight. Like if you can give somebody 3 days to refund or a week to refund, you want to put that in there, because that shows you're being flexible and that you're not being too rigid, and you're letting customers really take some time to make up their mind or make a decision about your product or service, or maybe even get their feet wet, test it out for one call, and then realize if they don't like it, they can move out. So that is very, very important, as much as possible, to be clear and to really explain what the refund options are, if there are any. Now, going back to pricing, you want to explain your payment terms. So what you want to do is, if you have, let's say, $1,200 or $2,000, you could break it up in installments. For example, 4 payments of $500 on a monthly basis, or whatever the case is. So you want to explain what the payment terms are, and as much as possible, make sure that the payment terms that the customer chooses are directly in that contract, so it's exactly what they signed up for and what they chose to pay you with. Now, there are also some standard things and some clauses that are pretty standard for contracts that you want to include. For example, a confidentiality agreement. So obviously, if you're going to be sharing some content that is proprietary to you, or maybe software that's proprietary to you, or different educational material, you want to make sure you have a confidentiality clause. And if people are allowed to download the material, they are not allowed to share it outside or publish it anywhere, and so on and so forth. So that's a really important one. It may seem kind of standard and just everybody pops it into their contract, but there's a reason that it's there, and it's there to protect you and obviously your work. And now, going back to the refund policy, as a side note, what you want to do is you also want to have a cancellation policy. So how can a customer terminate their agreement? For example, if they sign up for a year, are you going to allow them to terminate after 6 months? What kind of cancellation policy do you have? Are you going to allow customers to cancel at any time or at a certain time period? Obviously, you have to give an out. You cannot say, you signed up for a year and it's going to renew automatically every year for the next 10 years. You cannot make it so rigid like that, because that's going to raise eyebrows at the processor level, and you'll likely get declined because it's too rigid. So you want to give your customers an out, and maybe give them some kind of clause saying, you can cancel with a 3-day notice before the renewal period, or whatever the case is. And if you can, let them cancel online. If they signed up online, or if they, if there's some kind of checkout page that they use to pay you, give them an online option to cancel as well. Don't make it difficult. It will just create more disputes and chargebacks and more complications for you and your business. Now, one other thing that's very important, especially if you're a coach, if you have specific things that the customer needs to do or the buyer needs to do in order to abide by the contract. For example, they have to upload photos of themselves, or do specific projects, or do certain things in order to follow the program, you should put that in there. So when they come and they say, for example, hey, I am not getting results from this program, I'm not getting what I promised, well, you can go back and say, hey, you have not done what you said you were going to do in the contract. And that, again, is another way that will help you win chargebacks if that is to occur. Now, lastly, just kind of wrapping it all up, what you want to do is have, a jurisdiction for which this contract is enforced. If you're in the US, then you want to have a state and the country. So if somebody wants to pursue you or has any legal recourses towards you, you will pick the jurisdiction in that contract. You also want to talk about your intellectual property and how it's protected. And lastly, limitation of liability. So you want to limit the liability that you have to ideally just the maximum transaction of what you've charged the customer. So for example, if you're selling a coaching program for $2,000, you cannot have somebody pursue you for $100,000 because they didn't get the results. So you can say, the terms of the liability are maximum for the purchase that you've made with our company. So that kind of wraps things up. I'll put just a quick description down below of all these items that I mentioned, so you can grab them and perhaps put them in some AI tool that you use, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and that'll give you just a good outline. Now, I do have to mention, I am not a lawyer. I work with a lot of underwriters and a lot of compliance officers. So one trick that you have, if you don't want to use a lawyer, what you can do is you can apply to a payment processor in order to get a merchant account. You can send them your contract and they will likely give you feedback for free. For example, hey, your cancellation terms are too strict, or you need to include this, or you need to include that. So you'll get kind of free advice on your contract when you're applying for a merchant account, but you obviously have to have a template and you have to have something that makes sense. But as I said, I am not a lawyer, and if you do need advice and you need somebody to review it on a legal perspective, get yourself a good lawyer or go to a legal website at least to get some basis of information to give you specifics about your business. And if you need a merchant account and you have a contract ready and you're a high ticket coach, please feel free to contact myself or somebody from my team at Direct PayNet, and we'll be happy to help you. Have yourself a great day.